Hey there everyone, it's Joe, and welcome to the first video that is a fan-submitted deck list. And this deck here is brought to us by Nathan Ray Dalgleish, who very gracefully sent me this deck list over my social media link. So if you guys want to do anything like this, or have your deck featured on a video like this, then follow the links below and then drop me a message. You never know, this could be your deck next. Now this deck is very much based around Final Fantasy Tactics, and it's a tricolour deck, not that unlike my Knights of the Round deck that I posted before Opus 3 came out. And when we get to the deck list, you'll see there's a couple of influences from that deck present here. Now, I'm going to go over the deck exactly as it was given to me. Like, I won't be posting any kind of changes or anything like that, because quite honestly, I am trying to showcase other people's decks here. It's not my place to change other people's decks. If you guys like, what you see with this deck or anything like that, then by all means go out and build it yourself, or build it to your specification how you would do it. But I want to showcase everybody else's stuff as well, so that it's not just all about me. And I've been saying this for ages when I've been making these videos, is that I want it to be a community effort. Do you know what I mean? So if you guys want to post anything, then follow those links below and then let me know about your stuff. So without further ado, we'll just go straight into this deck, and I'm not going to be able to gloss over too much of these things because at the end of the day, it's not my deck, so I couldn't tell you the exact reasons behind everything, but I do have some notes that were given to me by Nathan here so that I can give you a general insight into what he was thinking when he built the deck. Now there's 25 forwards in this deck, 18 backups and 7 summons, so there's slightly less summons in the deck in favour of more forwards, so it's very much going to be a very aggressive base deck by the looks of things. So starting with the lightning forwards, we have 2 copies of Ninja, which I actually quite like Ninja anyway, and I have said this quite a few times, but it's a Final Fantasy Tactics unit, and as you'll see when we get to Ramza, a lot of this deck is built around Ramza, so you want to have as many FF Tactics units available to you to make him as valuable as physically possible, and Ninja's not a bad unit anyway, so it's definitely a good plus to go into Ramza. And then we have a single copy of Legendary Lightning. I've never been a big fan of Legendary Lightning. I think she costs a lot more than she brings to the table, but a lot of people really like Lightning, and Nathan's obviously one of those people. So we're only running 1 copy of her, so that he can search out for the various Odins that are present in the deck, and it's still a 9k body at the end of the day, so she's going to be battering some heads. And then the biggest brunt of this deck comes in the form of Ramza. And there's 4 Ramza in this deck, and I think that primarily the 4th one is there so that you can have him down late game once the others have all gone. He's still a knight and benefits from things like Avelia. You can search for him with Duke Goltana and stuff like that. But what you really want is you want availability for that, activated ability to make your Final Fantasy Tactics guys bigger, have first strike and haste, and you want him to be as big as possible. So honestly, you want to make sure that this guy is on the table as often as possible by the looks of things. And then going into the Earth forwards, we've gone with he's gone with 3 copies of Vincent. I keep saying we've gone with because it's just a force of habit, but it's not even me that's doing it. He's gone with a full 4 copies of Vincent here, 3 copies of the Legendary and 1 copy of the promo. Now, Vincent is just a really strong card. You can't really argue with Vincent here. He's just very good, and he's going to be able to pave the way for your various FF Tactics units to sort of stroll forwards. Ramza in particular, you have a lot of kind of death in this deck through things like the Ninjas, Vincent, Odins, so I can see where he's going with this, and there's a lot of just offensive pressure. I mean, if I were to make one slight change, I guess I would try and run slightly fewer high costing guys like Lightning, but as I said, this isn't my deck, this is his deck, and I want to showcase his what he's been playing. He tells me he's been doing very well at his locals with this deck, so I wanted to showcase it for everybody else. And then moving on, we have Deleter, who was very hot topic when Opus 3 came out. I think the hype on him is starting to die down a little now. I think it's because he's another 5 CP unit at the end of the day, but in this particular deck he fits in great because he's a Final Fantasy Tactics unit, he's a knight, he's very easily grabbed, he buffs everybody else in the deck, everybody else buffs him. It just makes a lot of sense for 2 copies at least of him to be in this deck. And then the 3rd copy of Deleter is one of the rare one from Opus 1, and I imagine that this card is used to kind of, replenish your backup slots and stuff after you've used them. So you can reuse Shoutout, you can reuse Railbarn, you can reuse Sage. There's lots of nice little things that you can do with this particular Deleter. And then finally, there's 3 copies of Dark Knight here, which is the 2-drop one from Opus 1. I quite like the Opus 2 Dark Knight as well, but obviously that one is an FF14 unit, not an FF Tactics unit. So he's tried to theme this as far into Final Fantasy Tactics as possible, which makes a lot of sense at the end of the day. You can also, see that he kind of synergizes quite well with just being a cheap unit that can get bigger later. So it's very combat orientated, lots of offensive pressure here, and it's going to make Ramza bigger for cheap. It's just a solid card here, really. Now, something I actually really struggle with in Final Fantasy trading card game is like multicoloring, like playing more than 2 colors in a deck. So this is why I really wanted to focus on, or this is why I chose this particular deck to showcase, because this has done it quite nicely. And I have tested this deck myself, and it does actually run a lot more smoothly than it looks. I think that of every tricolour deck, and there's decks out there like run the Archfiends and stuff that are 5 colour, and that blows my mind. But moving into the water forwards, we have 4 copies of Agrius here, 3 copies of the 2-drop one, and 1 copy of the 5-drop one. I think he's tried to keep 5 cost guys down a little bit by only running 1 of the Agrius, the 5 CP one. But I think it's quite nice having it available, because Avelia isn't super mandatory here, but I mean it's quite nice to have it. So I think having a searcher for her is great. And then obviously 2 CP Agrius is a valuable 2-drop Final Fantasy Tactics unit that can just kill things. It plays further into that I kill things, I make Final Fantasy Tactics guys. It just slots lovely into this place. And then 2 copies of Geomancer, which is an interesting pick, because this is a card I used to really like when Opus 1 came out, and then I just stopped running it over time. But fact is fact, it can be a really valuable unit. It's not something your opponent necessarily wants dying all the time, because you're going to draw a card out of it. And it being a Final Fantasy Tactics unit, it buffs things like Rams, or it buffs Ramza, and Ramza can buff it. It just seems like the deck is very centered around Ramza. So I mean, if honestly, I would look into perhaps maybe playing copies of Titan or something like that. Is an alternate method so that you can keep your Ramses alive for longer. And then Geomancer, I've always liked Geomancer in combination with Kefka, although Kefka is another high-costing backup, that another high-costing card that perhaps Nathan didn't particularly want to run, and I understand that. And then lastly, there's 2 copies of Emperor in here, and Emperor's, everybody knows what Emperor does at this point. He just locks a lot of stuff out of the game. It makes it harder for your guys to die. It makes it harder for your opponent to defend against you. It's just a really, really solid card, and because you're running copies of Sage in this deck, you can always return them to your hand after after he's died or after something's happened to him. Moving into his backups here, there are 18 in total, which is about how many I normally run in a deck. It's normally between 16 and 18. But with the Lightning ones, we have 2 copies of Red Mage, because good card is good, gives guys haste, makes it so you can swing for game really easily. There's not many better 2 CP Lightning backups than this one. And then 2 copies of Duke Goltana, which make a lot of sense because a lot of the Final Fantasy Tactics units are knights, so you can search them out. Ramza is a knight, Delita is a knight, Agrius is a knight, and they're the obviously primary functions of this deck. And then 2 copies of Sage, because there's not a ton of S abilities in this deck, but it's nice to be able to constantly replenish your resources should something go wrong with them or anything happen to some of your bigger guys. You can always get back a 5 CP Delita after he's died, and if he's died, some chances that something bad has happened to your opponent, then you just play him again. And I think in terms of the ratio of 2 CP, 3 CP, 4 CP, I think he's got this bit right. In total, I think there's maybe 1 or 2 less 2 CP units than I would usually play, but hey, there are lots of people play in different ways. And then we're going to move into the Earth ones, and there's 2 copies of Monk, because again, it's just a solid card. I mean, I would possibly consider Tama, because you're running 3 colours, it allows you to colour fix more easily, and allows you to play guys in your opponent's turn, so flashing in a Ramza when your opponent's attacking you and it being a lot bigger than it looks is quite a nice prospect. But I can see why Monk is a good choice here, because it can throw itself onto a guy and make it so that it's brave and bigger. It's just more death cards realistically, although I just dislike the fact that it has to be Earth that's paid into Monk, whereas Tama can have anything paid for it. I'm just really nervous about tricolour decks, I'm not gonna lie. And then we're going into 2 copies of Raban, who is just good. Raban just kills things, and he's very good at it. And then 2 copies of Shoutout, which is pretty much a staple for any Earth deck, because it board wipes if you're on a back foot, and with quite so many high costing guys, that is a possibility. So being able to make it so that your opponent overextends and you punish them for it and then start laying the groundwork for your big guys is a great idea. And then the water ones, I think the only change I would make to this personally, if I know I said at the beginning of the video that I wouldn't I present the deck as it is, but I think that I would probably just play 3 Ovelia, because I think that because so many of the cards in this deck are knights, it would benefit greatly from it, and it's a 2 CP unit, so it covers both of those bases quite nicely. But Nathan's opted for 2, which is also fine. And then he's gone with 2 copies of Minwu, which makes a lot of sense because your guys are going to be massive, and therefore things like fire and lightning aren't going to do too much to you. Alcid combos are a lot weaker against you and things like that. Just be careful, obviously, if you're going to run a deck like this, running too many of the smaller guys can leave them susceptible to area effect burn spells. Things like you could use Alcid with something else, and then Alcid kill one thing, and then Rigdia or something kill something else, and that's a problem. And then you have a single copy of Yuna, which I think has been played here mainly for the passive ability of, making it so your opponent can't have, enter graveyard effects like gold bears and things like that. So, single copies of this card are really good, and there's not enough room in the deck to run loads of copies of 2 CP Yuna, which I've forgone 5 CP Yuna for in favour of a little while ago. But I don't think there's enough room to have her in 3s in here because your 2 CP backup's going to be Ovelia. So running the one-off here is actually quite a nice idea. And then lastly, the single copy of Chaos, which is my saving grace to running anything tricolour, because, being able to play things that tap for more than one colour, or, like Shoutout and Chaos make a lot of sense to me. So I would much rather have these cards out as quickly as possible, but I would never run more than one of it because you can't discard it. And if you've already got 5 backups out, that can be a problem. And then lastly, we're going to go over the summons really quickly. And the summons are pretty basic, actually. They're quite simple, they're all removal, and that's a really, really great idea. So we've got 2 4 CP Odin and then 2 7 CP Odin, which I've gone over 100 times in my other videos, particularly my starter deck videos, to explain why a lot of people run those. And then 3 copies of Leviathan. I mean, an alternative to Leviathan now is Famfrit. Famfrit's very, very strong, and because you're running quite so many cheap units, that's something that perhaps you could benefit from, but there's absolutely nothing wrong with Leviathan. Particularly if your opponent does somehow get some blockade that's bigger than you, you just get rid of it really, really quickly in a way that Odin can't. And that's really, really useful. So the game plan, as far as I can tell here, is to maintain pressure on your opponent with cards like Agrius and Vincent until you're at a point where you can accumulate enough momentum to start slapping your opponent around the head really hard with cards like Ramza and Delita. And you've got countermeasures if your opponent builds up too much momentum before you in the form of things like Shoutout, and you can lock a game out and slow your opponent down quite nicely with the Emperor. There's lots of nice little ways of interacting. You maintain your card advantage through things like Sage and Duke Goltana. 5 CP Agrius can help on that front, and you have plenty of removal, like tons of it. So, I mean, it's a really, really fun little deck, and I really would encourage you guys to try it. Sound off in the comments if you really wanted to try a deck like this, or if there's some slight changes that you would make to it. And thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much to Nathan for submitting this deck to me. As I've said at the beginning of the video, if you want to have your deck featured on my channel, then drop me a message on various social media links, which I'll leave below. And that's it pretty much for this video. So again, thanks very much for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and love you very, very much if you have already. And I'll speak to you guys soon. There'll be plenty more deck lists to come, both from me and from you guys. So I'll speak to you guys soon. Bye.